Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Littlefield. Thank you so much for joining me today to chat about Pardot and EDA, solutioning for higher education. I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. So today, I'm going to start by giving you a brief introduction about myself and who I am, and then we'll talk about solutioning for the education data architecture in Pardot. Specifically, I'd like to talk with you all today about leads, opportunities, custom object integration, and lead scoring and grading. I'm going to try to save some time at the end for Q&A. I'll also be trying to monitor the chat today, but I am flying solo here, and so I may hold the questions until the end, but hoping to save some time for a good Q&A. I'm also going to go ahead and launch a poll now. I just want to learn a little bit more about you all and who we have joining us today and your experience with Pardot. So giving you a little bit of background about myself, I started my career in marketing about 15 years ago. I've been working with marketing automation technology and CRM technology since that time for about 15 years. And in 2012, I was hired at the University of New England as a marketing manager. I was the first hire in an initiative to build an operations unit to support their online programs internally. So I was hired as a marketing manager in charge of the marketing automation platform, and within less than 1 year, we migrated from HubSpot to Pardot, and I was the owner of Pardot. So I've been a Pardot user since 2012, 2013, pre-acquisition by Salesforce. At UNE, I quickly moved after my hire into a director position. I was director of strategic marketing initiatives, where we grew pretty rapidly. I was overseeing not only the marketing department, but the online admissions department and the online retention team as well. And when I left UNE, I was assistant dean for finance and strategy. So I was overseeing the technology arm, the UNE online brand, and many other facets of the online college. In my tenure at UNE, we experienced a significant amount of growth. It was about 18% year-over-year growth in enrollment, which is pretty significant in higher education. And our first program, which when I started in 2012 had 40 students enrolled, had over 500 when I left. And so I attribute a lot of that success to Pardot and the Salesforce infrastructure that we built to support the online college. And so let's talk about higher ed marketing. In 2017, which is the most recent year that we have data available for, degree granting U.S. post-secondary institutions spent around $730 million on advertising. This includes TV, cable, outdoor, online ads. That's the reported statistic. So it's clear, I think, now more than ever, we really need to understand what's happening with our marketing dollars. We need to track cost per lead, ROI. This has been true not just because of the current state, with COVID and everything changing, but it's been true for higher ed for a long time. There's a lot of question around the cost of higher education and the return of investment for students enrolling in programs. And so really every dollar that we spend, we need to make sure we're spending responsibly. I really firmly believe that the foundation of the best educational experience starts at the first touch. And for that reason, I believe marketing teams have an incredible responsibility in higher education, whether you're in a central communications office or you're attached to an enrollment recruitment team or advancement even. We gather so much data through the marketing journey that can be leveraged, for example, to identify applicant risk, to predict melt, to predict attrition, to predict success in a program. That's really why I have a passion for the role of marketing automation and specifically Pardot in higher ed. I find incredible value working with higher ed clients now as a solution architect at Traction on Demand, implementing Pardot as part of their recruiting and admissions or advancement projects. So considerations for Pardot and EDA. These are the 5 things that we're going to review in the following slides. So my hope today is that you leave here a little bit better equipped to answer some of these questions you see on the screen. So lead strategy, how to decide which architecture model is right for your institution. opportunity management, when and how to use the opportunity object. Custom object integration, what is it and do you need it? Cohesive solutioning, make sure that your prospects can be segmented appropriately in Pardot. And then finally, my absolute favorite is lead scoring and grading. So I would go as far as to say this is the Pardot feature that will give you the most ROI in higher ed recruitment. So jumping in to this question about leads and contacts. So as I mentioned, I am an education solution architect at Traction on Demand. I moved into this position about a year and a half ago almost, and I would say that on my higher education projects for recruiting and admissions, really through that lens, this is the question that I hear most. So the EDA ERD, if you know it well, if you've seen it published in the Power of Us Hub, you'll know that it doesn't include leads in that ERD. And the account structure of the education data architecture really requires some customization for the lead conversion process so that your leads convert into the right account. And so I think for this reason, there's a lot of question of folks that folks have around, should I use leads? Should I use opportunities even if they're not in the ERD? Why are they not accounted for in the education data architecture? And really it's because the answer is different for each institution. There is no perfect answer. There's no one model is better than the other. It really comes down to a few questions about you, your institution, and your processes. So the questions that I like to ask when trying to figure this piece of the puzzle out is, does your institution manage a high volume of unqualified prospects? For example, do you purchase lists from a vendor or any other external sources in high volumes? So a lot of times it's very common for recruiting teams, for example, to purchase names from test vendors like ACT or SAT. If that is the case, leads may be for you. But on the other side of the coin, if your prospects are generally inbound, if they have awareness of your brand and your enrollment management process really doesn't have a clear delineation between pre-inquiry and inquiry, you may not need the infrastructure that's built around leads. You may be able to go straight to contacts. So the decision for or against leads often comes down to these questions. What does your volume look like, and what is the process that you are looking to be able to do in your system around lead management and lead conversion? So there are pros and cons, of course, to each approach. Leads and contacts, so utilizing the leads object, you really have that ability to reduce clutter in your contacts object. So that means you can have that clear delineation for engagement between your general inquiries and those who are sales qualified. You can also leverage things like lead assignment rules and other native features, which are really really great to have at your fingertips, specifically because we see a lot of complexity around lead assignment in a higher ed model. EDA customizations, though, are required for lead conversion. So there are some tricky pieces around lead conversion to make sure that your leads convert into the right account model. One thing that I've seen, my institution had leads in the very beginning at UNE when we rolled out our Salesforce org, and we did have a challenge with duplicate management. And this also is compounded at times when you have a community at play. So if you have lead, contacts, and users being generated from your community, you have to be cognizant of duplicate management. And then complexity for end users. So I saw some challenges with my admissions team in particular with, when do we convert the lead? What is that right time? If you have a high volume of leads and maybe you don't have a robust team managing those leads, maybe you only have a few enrollment counselors, volume is also another consideration because that lead conversion process in Salesforce is manual. Contacts only, the benefits there, simplified object model. So you may know you can pipe Pardot directly to contacts and bypass that lead object. And so simplifies things from that perspective of one-to-one prospect and contact. There's no need for manual lead conversion. So you eliminate that stress from your team and that kind of manual effort. You may also experience simplified reporting, again, reducing some of those duplicate issues that you might see around lead and contact and having duplicate records between the two objects. No customizations needed, excuse me, for the EDA functionality. So again, we eliminate that complexity that we have with the leads object at play here. However, there are some other complexities that come up. for us. So with contacts only, you would then have to consider, how do you create an opportunity if that is no longer being created upon conversion of the lead to a contact? That's something to consider. And then also you have to consider loss of some of the very cool features that come with leads. So things like Einstein scoring, other lead-based features. You may not have that access in the future. So that's just something to think about in terms of future strategy. All right, and I just ended our poll. It looks like there is a good spread of folks. Some of you are just researching, some of you are new, some of you experiencing or have experience with Pardot for a little while, and some of you are Pardot pros. So hopefully each of you all walk away with something today. Let me go ahead and jump forward to the next topic. So opportunity. This is something, lesson learned from my time at the University of New England when we were rolling out Salesforce. We didn't really understand how to apply the opportunity object in a higher ed business model. Very salesy, very much, for a sales pathway, there is, ROI, investment tracking, that dollar tracking on there, and that really was not applicable to us at the University of New England. And so we made the decision to not leverage the object when we first rolled out our platform. And years later, that was one of my biggest regrets as leader of the Salesforce and Pardot implementation. So there is incredible value in the opportunity object. And so as a best practice, I always recommend that you use 3 key objects when you are trying to move your lifecycle map into Salesforce. The opportunity, affiliation, and application. So all 3 of those objects really play a key role. It does have, the opportunity object has incredible value in the education space from a reporting and ROI perspective. So something to keep in mind, of course, is that an opportunity record will only sync over to Pardot if it has at least 1 contact role. So you'll want to make sure that you have that structure correctly in place. So why do we care about this for Pardot? So opportunities are available to us to use in segmentation. So for example, you can segment on opportunities created X days ago or closed X days ago. This is a great tool for nurturing. Think, for example, after you admit someone into your program, so you're in a closed won opportunity stage, and there's a gap between that admission and when that person is going to start their program. What a great piece of data to have to leverage in Pardot segmentation so that you can create an engagement program to nurture those folks. Keep in mind, one little tip, that as a contact in Salesforce, you may be related to multiple opportunities. So this is just kind of that reminder that if your segmentation rules are not structured properly, they may be too loose. You could end up pulling in unwanted opportunities. Excuse me. So that's just a little tip to keep in mind as we're talking about segmentation on opportunities. Another thing that's really cool that you can do with opportunities and having them available to you in Pardot is that you can automate off of them. So for example, thinking through, again, that closed won opportunity stage as maybe deposit into a program or acceptance into a program. You can have automation rules that tag all of those prospect records as student so that you can send them maybe into a student nurturing journey. So very cool automation capabilities there as well. And then one thing we'll be talking a little bit more in depth towards the end of the presentation is using opportunities in your lead scoring model. So having that data available to you to increase or decrease a score is also very important and very key. But mostly, I think the opportunity object is there to help you in reporting ROI. So your opportunity should have a relationship to the primary campaign. And this can be an incredible tool for marketers to assess your campaign effectiveness. So you'll need to maybe think through, again, based on previous slides around how your opportunity is created, how you align all of these records, opportunity, campaign, and contact. However, if you set up that structure correctly, you will get incredible value that will help you in assessing the effectiveness of your campaigns within Salesforce and in Pardot. Custom object integration, another one of my favorite topics for higher ed clients that I work with. So the EDA as an architecture is really great because it's provided higher ed or education K-12 clients with an education-specific framework in Salesforce. Unlike that just traditional sales UI of Salesforce, which is great for corporate clients and others, but really prior to EDA being available to us in higher ed, we were really kind of retrofitting the Salesforce interface to work for us, and we don't have to do that anymore now that we have EDA available to us. However, if you're a current Pardot user or a Pardot Pro, you know that the complex object structure of EDA can present challenges for marketing users. So you'll know if you're a Pardot user that custom objects are only visible with custom object integration. And so even then, you can only query the data on those records. For example, you can't use that data that lives on a custom object in your HTML or within email content. This is something that I see clients get tripped up on quite a bit, specifically, again, in recruiting and admissions, because there's a lot of valuable data that lives on those child objects. So think application, affiliation, program enrollment. You've got a lot of rich data there. And so it's something to keep in mind as you are thinking of purchasing Pardot, if you're not already a Pardot user, that you may need custom object integration in order to get some of that rich data that you are storing within your education data architecture. You do have some options without custom object integration where you can carry data points up maybe through an automation to the contact level, but that can get a little bit cluttery on your contact object. You don't want to be bringing all of your data points up to that level just so that they can be surfaced in Pardot. So you'll want to do that selectively. Data on custom objects, if you have that available to you, will become available for journey segmentation. So you can also use it for automation rules. And so we purchased the custom object integration at UNE just before I left, about a year or 2 years, and it opened up this whole new world for us and how we could segment our lists so that we can, again, send them down those right engagement programs and get them the information that those contacts needed based on the data that we knew about them. I think there's a session today at 11:20 on custom object integration, and if you are a higher ed marketer, I strongly suggest that you attend that session to learn a little bit more about how you can leverage custom objects and maybe some of the gotchas as well around custom object integration and potentially maybe even what's on the roadmap. Without custom object integration, one of the most critical things that I always recommend is cohesive solutioning. And so this is something that you just have to have, that you have to do as a Pardot and EDA user. We have to make sure that we are configuring our Salesforce org really with that data segmentation in mind for marketing purposes. If you don't do this in the beginning, you may not have the correct data structure for your segmented list. You may not have the data at all if you aren't thinking through in a cohesive way. So on any project that I'm on, I always kind of start at the end. How do you want to segment your data? How do you want to use your data? How do you want to leverage your marketing data? Because really it's key that you're structuring Salesforce accordingly so that you can ensure that that data is available to you in Pardot. One of the things that Traction on Demand has as an offering is our Recruiting and Admissions Accelerator, which helps kind of recruiting and admissions units get up to speed quickly on Salesforce. And we often see implementations of this partnered with Pardot implementations at the same time. And one of the things that I find is key is that we've created something within our accelerator package called Status Processor. And what this does is you're seeing a little snippet there on the screen of our tool. But basically what this does is it's a tool that we've built that keeps your role, status, and stage pick list aligned across objects. And so that's something that's really helpful to have and to think through strategically on the Pardot side. If you're moving an application through a number of statuses, you'll want that on all of the objects that it's linked to, have that status update so that your contact record, say for example, reflects that you have an applicant who is awaiting grading decision. You can make sure that person is pulled out of a certain nurturing campaign so that they aren't receiving, apply now emails. So this is something that, whether you are a recruiting and admissions accelerator client of Tractions or not, I would recommend thinking through something along this line to support your cohesive solutioning, a way for you to align your record so that role, status, and stage, moving your applicant or your student through that life cycle, you can keep all of your records aligned, and so that your data stays clean and your stages are clear on the Pardot side for segmentation purposes. And lastly, my very favorite topic, lead scoring and grading. As I mentioned in the beginning, if there's one thing that you walk away with today as a higher ed marketer, it is hopefully that you need to implement a solid lead scoring and grading model in Pardot. This is where you are going to see the most ROI. We're in a very competitive time. There's a lot of noise in the market, and if you have a solid lead scoring and grading model, it can really help you with efficiency and ROI. So as you may know, lead scoring is a numeric value that correlates with a prospect's interest level. So traditionally, the higher the lead score, the more interested they are, the lower, the less engaged. We factor things like web page visits, email opens, downloads, actions, things like that. Pardot comes with an out-of-the-box model, and it's a really low lift to customize that to suit your own needs. I think the biggest mistake that I see my clients make is assuming that they can just go with the out-of-the-box model. They have lead scoring in place, and that's good enough. That's sufficient, and they don't do anything more than that. It's very declarative to configure that to meet your needs. So for example, where an email open receives maybe 1 point out of the box, if you want to increase or decrease that value, you can do that very, very easily. One other thing to remember is negative scoring. We used to see some of our highest lead scores in our Pardot database on prospective applicants that we knew really were not a good fit for our program. And so you may want to reduce score on things like submission errors, or reducing a score based on maybe how long they've been sitting in your database. Scoring categories can also be great if you're managing recruiting and admissions for multiple programs. You can, for example, see a score calculated based on an interaction with specific programs' assets. So you can see that kind of as a sub-score to the overarching score. So again, creating categories may be a really cool way to see some of the effectiveness of your specific campaign assets. Lead grading, on the other side of the coin, is reflected as a letter grade. It looks at the flip side of lead scoring. How interested are we as an institution in that lead? It's usually derived by acquiring some sort of data point: start time frame, program of interest, geography. So these are set by creating profiles and establishing automation rules to match criteria, and you can increase or decrease the score. Prospects usually will begin with a blank grade, and then will change based on whether or not they meet the criteria that you set. So traditionally, we see lead grading examples as things like company size or job title, not really applicable to those of us in higher ed, but things like location, maybe even past academic performance. If you have a GPA from their undergraduate program, say if you're marketing for a graduate program, on their application, that's data that you can use. Start time frame, are they looking to start now or in 6 years? Maybe a previous connection to your institution if they are a legacy or they're alumni. So my recommendation is that you create ideal buyer personas and set your grading model based on those criteria. And then the absolute key for higher ed, you have to use both together. I see oftentimes even some folks recommend, not to roll out a grading score, and that actually was the approach we took at UNE while I was there for the first portion of our Pardot use. We had our scoring model set up, but no grade. And so, again, you're only getting part of the story if you don't set up your grading model. With grade and score together, you can come up with that combination threshold of when that prospect demonstrates both ideal fit and high interest. And then you consider them hot, and you pass that off, that marketing qualified lead, pass that off to your enrollment team. It reduces clutter for them. It can make them more efficient. It it can also help marketing teams be more efficient. So something really that I strongly believe in is implementing Pardot and your lead scoring and grading together. So something to keep in mind as you implement. I know I'm running up on time here. That's my last slide. I haven't saved a ton of room for questions. I am happy to share this presentation. I really appreciate Andrea and the Sercante team for inviting me and having me speak here. It doesn't look like there's many questions here in the chat, so please feel free to reach out to me directly if you have any questions, any thoughts, or even just want help solutioning. I always love to talk Pardot and higher ed, so please feel free to reach out. And thank you again so much, everyone, for joining today. I hope you all walked away with a little bit of information, at least, that you didn't know before about Pardot in the higher ed space. Thanks again.